In April 1976, doctors rushed a frail body onto a plane flying out of Mexico. The man weighed barely 90 pounds. His hair and beard had not been cut in years. His toenails had grown so long they curled in on themselves. Fingerprints were needed to confirm who he was, because no one could recognize him. That man was worth over $2 billion, and just 30 years earlier, he was the most dazzling human being on the planet. This is the story of Howard Hughes, film mogul, record-breaking aviator, defense contractor, casino king, real estate titan. A man who could have anything, and anyone, he wanted. A man who broke every barrier the sky could throw at him. And a man who, in the end, couldn't leave his own room. How does someone go from conquering the world to being utterly consumed by it? The answer is not simple, and it is not comfortable. Because what happened to Howard Hughes was not just bad luck. It was a collision of genius, trauma, addiction, and a mind that was never given the help it desperately needed. To understand the fall, we have to start with the rise. Howard Robard Hughes Jr. was born in 1905 in Humboldt, Texas. His father, Howard Sr., had invented a revolutionary oil drill bit, one that could bore through rock that no other tool could crack. By the time Howard Jr. was 18, both his parents were dead. He inherited everything. Most heirs squander fortunes. Hughes multiplied his. He moved to Hollywood and produced Hell's Angels, an aviation war epic so ambitious it nearly bankrupted him. He hired 137 pilots. 4 of them died making it. He didn't stop. The film grossed a fortune. Then came the flying. Hughes didn't just collect planes. He flew them. He redesigned them. He broke records in them. 1935, he set a new land speed record, 352 miles per hour. 1938, he flew around the entire world in just under 4 days. He was welcomed home with a ticker tape parade through New York City. By the 1940s, he had founded Hughes Aircraft, won massive defense contracts, and had become one of the most powerful men in America. But here's where it starts to get complicated. Hughes had already survived one serious crash before 1946, but on July 7th of that year, he climbed into his newest creation, the XF-11, a top-secret reconnaissance aircraft he'd personally designed for the military. He was supposed to do a short test loop. He stayed up too long. One of the propellers malfunctioned. The plane rolled. Hughes tried everything he knew. It wasn't enough. The plane tore through 3 houses in Beverly Hills before finally stopping. Hughes was pulled from the burning wreckage by a Marine sergeant who happened to be passing by. The damage was catastrophic. Crushed collarbone, multiple cracked ribs, a collapsed lung. His heart had been physically displaced inside his chest, 3rd-degree burns, and chronic, unrelenting pain that would never fully leave him. Doctors said he would not survive the night. He did. But the man who walked out of that hospital, slowly, painfully, was different. The doctors prescribed morphine and codeine for the pain. That was standard practice. What wasn't standard was what happened next. Hughes never stopped needing them. Hughes had shown signs of OCD long before the crash. As a young man, he'd sometimes reorganize objects obsessively or get fixated on the precise sizing of peas on his dinner plate. Those who knew him well noticed the quirks, but they were easy to overlook in someone so brilliant and driven. After 1946, those quirks became something else entirely. He became consumed by a terror of germs. He forced his staff to use multiple layers of paper towels when handing him anything. He burned his clothes if someone nearby fell ill. He wrote lengthy, detailed memos, some running to dozens of pages, instructing his aides exactly how to open a can of peaches or how to hand him a spoon. Paradoxically, and this is what makes the OCD so brutal to witness, The man who was terrified of contamination stopped bathing. He stopped cutting his hair, his beard, his fingernails, his toenails. His body became something he couldn't control, while he desperately tried to control everything around him. Scientists and psychologists who have studied his case believe several forces collided simultaneously: severe OCD that went untreated, chronic pain from repeated injuries, opioid dependency, possible traumatic brain injury from the crashes, and the compounding weight of almost complete social isolation. And wealth, his immense, insulating wealth, meant no one could stop him. There was no intervention, no family member with enough power, no doctor he couldn't dismiss. He was a billionaire, and he was drowning. And no one could make him admit it. By the late 1950s, Howard Hughes had effectively vanished from public life. He gave no press conferences, made no public appearances, was seen by almost no one outside his tight circle of aides, many of whom were Mormon men he trusted, partly because they didn't drink or smoke, and he believed them to be cleaner. In 1966, he arrived in Las Vegas. He had himself wheeled through the back entrance of the Desert Inn on a gurney in the middle of the night, a shell of a man, and checked into the top floor penthouse. He didn't leave for 4 years. He watched the same movie, Ice Station Zebra, over and over and over again. His staff estimated he screened it more than 150 times. He ate almost nothing. Some days, chocolate milk and chicken. Other days, almost nothing at all. He conducted his entire business empire through the handwritten memos, sometimes bizarre, rambling, contradictory, passed between layers of aides who had to interpret what he meant. And yet, the empire kept running. Hughes Aircraft, Summa Corporation, Las Vegas casinos, real estate, defense contracts. The machine kept turning even as the man at its center faded away. Millions were lost to skimming and mismanagement. Hughes was too isolated to notice, or too far gone to care. In his last decade, Hughes moved constantly, but never outward. He traveled between hotel penthouses in the Bahamas, Nicaragua, England, Canada, Mexico, always in the same sealed darkness, always surrounded by the same small group of aides. His physical decline was now unmistakable. He stood 6 feet 4 inches tall. In his prime, he had been a striking athletic man. By his final years, he weighed under 100 pounds. His teeth had decayed. Bed sores formed on his body from lying still. His kidneys were beginning to fail, damaged by years of opioid use, dehydration, and near total neglect. On April 5th, 1976, Hughes was loaded onto a plane in Acapulco, Mexico, bound for Houston, finally heading to hospital for treatment. He died in the air at 70,000 feet, above the Texas landscape he had once conquered as a young man. Cause of death, kidney failure, compounded by malnutrition, dehydration, and the accumulated damage of decades of codeine addiction. When his body arrived at the hospital, the FBI was called in. They needed fingerprints to confirm who he was, because the body before them, wasted, skeletal, unrecognizable, bore no resemblance to any known photograph of Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes did not have to die this way. That is the haunting truth at the center of this story. The OCD was real. The pain was real. The addiction that followed his injuries was real. But none of these things were inevitable. What made them devastating, what turned manageable struggles into total destruction, was the combination of two things that should never exist together: unlimited power and zero accountability. His wealth meant he could always fire the doctor who challenged him. He could buy whatever hotel suite he wanted. He could dismiss anyone who pushed back. And so a man who needed help, desperately, urgently needed it, was surrounded by people whose job was to make sure he never had to face that need. There's a reason we find stories like Howard Hughes' so compelling and so uncomfortable, because they ask a question we don't like to answer. What happens when the systems that are supposed to protect us, medicine, family, community, are replaced entirely by money, Hughes had everything, and everything was not enough. Howard Hughes left behind a complicated legacy. His work in aviation helped shape the modern jet age. His defense contracts built technologies that still fly today. And the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, funded by his estate, has become one of the most important biomedical research organizations in the world, responsible in part for breakthroughs in genetics, neuroscience, and disease. He gave billions to science in death, the same science that might have saved him in life. Howard Hughes once flew faster and higher than any human being alive. In the end, he couldn't leave his room. The sky, it turns out, was never his enemy. His own mind was.